Hi, I'm Bud. Welcome to Kimber's Kingdom, the home of everything Kimba the White Lion. On this channel, I'm hoping to connect with fellow Kimber fans like you. So if there's something you'd like to see more of, or less of, let me know in the comments. I want to make the best videos I can for you guys. For generations, cultures across the world have created their own stories to explain how things came to be the way they are. And across these stories, though there are differences, there are also many similarities. You probably already know this, but what if I told you that most of those similarities also apply to a much more recent myth? The epic tale of Kimba the White Lion. Yes, really. Fair warning, I will talk about the ending of the Kimba the White Lion manga and 1997 film, so if you haven't seen that yet and you care about spoilers, here's a link to a spoiler-free video you can enjoy instead. Now, back to the video. Many religious myths feature a creative sacrifice, where a powerful being sacrifices themselves to create a new world or bring something new into the world. The Indonesian myth of, apologies in advance for my pronunciation, Hainu Wele, tells of a young girl who is murdered and cut into pieces, and the pieces become food for all of humanity. According to Chinese mythology, the first ever living being was Pangu, and when he died, the world as we know it was created. His breath became the wind, his blood became the rivers, and the fleas in his hair became the animals? I guess that explains why Kimba can jump so high. And finally, Norse mythology tells of the god Mir, whose flesh became the earth, bones became the mountains, and brains became the clouds. Gruesome. Anyway, the common thread here is that a deity gave their own life to create a new world. Sound familiar? At the end of the Kimba the White Lion manga, Kimba impales himself on a sword so that Dr. Moustache can make it back to the human world, share with them the energy source he's discovered, and, it's implied, usher in a new age of understanding and eventual peace between humans and animals. This new world is created through Kimbers Sacrifice. His destruction was an act of creation, just as in classical religious mythology. There's one more example of this too, which you're probably familiar with. But alright, this connection is a little tenuous. Plenty of stories feature a hero's sacrifice to create a new world. Darth Vader sacrifices himself to save his son and bring about the New Republic. Azrael sacrifices himself to allow the events of Undertale to take place, and ultimately allow the monsters to return to the surface. Even Ash Ketchum sacrifices himself to make peace between Mewtwo and humanity. So although it's interesting, this story element alone doesn't really mean anything. It could just be a coincidence. But there's another common thread throughout much of mythology, the Deus Otiosus, or idol god, a god who withdraws to the heavens, cutting off contact with humanity, just like Kimba does for much of his adult life. Alright, so Kimba's not exactly a god, but as we established earlier, he is a creator of sorts. He brings about a new world with peace between humans and animals, so I think this still applies. And while there are examples of it in non-religious literature, this trope of a creator who secludes themselves away from humanity actually isn't that common, so it seems like a very specific coincidence that Kimba the White Lion just happens to include this as a central plot element. But alright, that's just two similarities. That could be a coincidence. It's not unreasonable to explain that away as an accident. Except, there aren't just two similarities. There's a common theme across Greek, Celtic, and even Hindu mythology which is central to Kimba the White Lion. And not just the manga like the previous examples I mentioned, the TV series too. I'm talking about the Titanomachy, a common concept in classical mythology where a race of younger, more civilized beings replace their older, more anarchic and chaotic forebears. In Greek mythology, the younger civilized gods defeat the Titans and bring order to the cosmos. According to the Celts, their Celtic gods of light and life fight against the more ancient Fomorians, gods of death and darkness. And in Hinduism, the younger Devas fight against the older Asuras who crave wealth and use violence and create disorder to get it. That's extremely specific. There's no way you could include that by accident. Yet that's exactly what happens in Kimba the White Lion. When Kimba brings civilization to his jungle, he has to fight against the much older lion Claw and Panther Cassius, who don't want to obey the rules and oppose the harmony and peace that Kimber is trying to introduce, preferring instead to have the freedom to kill or bully whoever they want to. It's a clash between a younger, more civilized force and an older, more anarchic one. The idea of a jungle where animals live in peace is in and of itself young, and Kimber's youthful new model for how animals should live together faces constant battles against the forces of the old way, be they human hunters, the destroyers, or rogue predators like Clutch, trying to maintain the old order of chaos and death, and oppose the young new society's efforts to establish civilization and protect life. So Kimber the White Lion features a creator who's sacrificed in order to create a new world, a creator who withdraws to the heavens, or in this case the jungle, and avoids contact with humanity, and a civilization of younger, more orderly beings fighting against the older forces of anarchy. These are all common themes across classical religious mythology. The evidence all seems to line up. So could it be? Is Kimber the White Lion really a religious myth? Well, no, of course not. No one's praying to Kimber, no one's building a shrine to him. Well, I mean, okay, I probably would do that if I had the money. No one is trying to convert people to Kimberism. Oh, alright, maybe I'm doing that too. Look, the point is that Kimber the White Lion clearly isn't a religious text. But I just went through all the similarities it has with such texts. So surely that means something, right? Surely there's some connection. Well, yes, Kimber the White Lion isn't a religious text. But I would argue that it is, in a way, a deeply spiritual one. Kimber the White Lion gives us moral guidelines by which to live our lives. It tells us something very meaningful about our place in the world and our relationship with the creatures we share it with, and it inspires us by showing us the example of someone pure of heart. Not a mighty god in this case, just a vulnerable lion cub, but that makes it perhaps even more inspiring. I've often wondered what spirituality actually is, and I definitely don't fully understand it. But I think what it might come down to is connection to the world around you. Not only physically through your feet touching the earth, but also emotionally, by feeling the pain and pleasure of all the other creatures you share this planet with, and psychologically by gaining a sense of purpose greater than yourself, by believing in contributing something to the larger world beyond just you. Spirituality can be achieved through religion, which gives us that larger purpose, by meditation, which grounds us in the present moment and makes us more deeply connected to the world outside and less stuck in our own heads, or by simply living your life for the world outside you rather than for your own gain. And that's why Kimber the White Lion is such a spiritual text, because it encourages us to think about our place in the world. Central themes in the series include how we should treat other people, our relationship with other animals, how society interacts with the environment. They're all themes that are bigger than ourselves, that are outside ourselves. Watching Kimber the White Lion encourages us to think about the rest of the world beyond our own minds, and in doing so it connects us to that wider world. It makes us bigger than ourselves. It makes us spiritual. So it makes sense that the series uses a lot of narrative elements and techniques from classical religious myths. After all, those texts were trying to do exactly the same thing, to connect us to something larger than ourselves. That's all for now, fellow animals. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you won't miss a thing. If there's something Kimber related you'd like to see a video about, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your suggestions. I might look ferocious, but I don't bite, promise.